The first thing I would like to say is thank you and your family and your husband very much for all the service that you do for the country. Personally, I have nothing but respect for the people that put on uniform and serve their country and the families that have to make sacrifices for that to happen. I also want to appreciate the manner in which you responded to the points made. Unlike some other people on YouTube, you can actually have a conversation with somebody you disagree with and not have to resort to insults and calling people names and just argue the points. And if the political world was like that, it would be a lot better place. Now on to my response to what you had to say.
Fact. Saddam Hussein used weapons of mass destruction on his own people. He was in an agreement that said he could and could not do certain things, or he would be taken out of power. This was in punishment for his aggression against Kuwait. He violated that agreement. We warned him a bunch of times, and we had the right and support in the world to take him out of power.
I'm not going to argue that we didn't have the right to take Saddam out of power for his violations of the UN resolutions. However, I would argue that we did go in there at the wrong time. At the time we were currently involved in taking out Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, the people that attacked us on 9/11, and we should not have wavered from that. We should have continued staying the course in Afghanistan, going against Taliban and Al-Qaeda and hunting down Osama bin Laden, and not worried about Iraq, which was not a threat to us at the time. Another point I would make is that the 1441, the resolution that supposedly gave us the authority to go into Iraq, was based on a logical fallacy. Basically, Saddam Hussein had to prove that he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. It's very hard to prove a negative. So that's one point I would make. Not that he didn't violate other agreements, but again, regardless of the agreements that he broke, it was not the time or place to go into Iraq while we were still dealing with the terrorists who attacked us.
And because we did that, the world and the country of Iraq are going to be better places.
In a vacuum, you're right. The world is a better place without Saddam Hussein. However, it's not a vacuum. We have currently allowed Al-Qaeda to reach strengths that haven't been seen since 9/11, and that came from a report that was given to our own administration earlier this year. So if Al-Qaeda has been allowed to reach 9/11 strengths, as I stated in the Unsafe Under Republicans video that I responded with initially, then it's really hard to say that the world right now is a better place if the people who attacked us on 9/11 are strengthening and have strengthened and are returning to a strength where they may be able to attack us again, and that's just not good.
Obama did not support the war in Iraq from the start, and so he can't claim any victory that comes out of it.
What Barack Obama can claim is that he was correct on the initial decision, on the most important decision, which was whether or not to go into Iraq. He opposed it, and rightly so. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, even though the administration kept trying to tie it in with 9/11. As it showed in the 9/11 Commission report, there was no connection between Iraq and Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, and so there was really no reason for us to go in there that had anything to do with our national defense or striking back at those who attacked us on 9/11, i.e. Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and those terrorists. So again, the wisdom of knowing that we should not have gone in there in the first place is the example of leadership that I expect in my next president.
He supported withdrawing troops before the surge was working, which would have effectively meant packing up and leaving, forfeiting everything we'd done up to that point, and the success we're now seeing.
The first point I would make to that is that there's a difference between what Barack Obama wants to do in a responsible withdrawal and just packing up and leaving. What the Democrats have called for, well, the majority of Democrats have been calling for, what H.R. 1591 called for, was a responsible draw out of Iraq, where we slowly draw out our troops while training and equipping the Iraqi people to defend themselves. The point, though, that the troop surge is working is, in fact, it seems that after the fact and after the O'Reilly interview and after everybody was saying, oh, look, the surge worked at reducing the violence in Iraq, it turns out that in a report that was shown, came out on September 19th, there was a Yahoo report saying that satellite images show ethnic cleanout in Iraq, and basically saying that the reason for the drop of violence was that people had left the areas where the violence was taking place right before the surge happened in the first place. Minority Sunni Arabs were driven out of many neighborhoods by Shiite militants enraged by the bombing of the Samarra Mosque in February 2006. The bombing, blamed on the Sunni militant group Al-Qaeda, sparked a wave of sectarian violence. And by the launch of the surge, many of the targets of conflict had either been killed or fled the country, and they turned off the lights when they left. So basically what happened is that the people had already left, and now we're claiming, quote, victory over the reduction of violence, when the reduction of violence actually took place because of ethnic cleansing. So I really don't think we can necessarily claim victory. Not to say that the troops aren't doing a good job, because they are. And there was some other key elements involved in the surge besides the actual troop level increase, like a change of tactics, where we used to operate in a way where our troops would go in, they would clean out an area, and then they would leave. And so all basically the terrorists or cockroaches would scatter when the troops came in, and when the troops left, they would come back in. And the cockroaches tend to do. But when the troops changed their tactics, and when they said, okay, well, we're going to go in a neighborhood, we're going to stay, we're going to get to know the people, we're going to have a presence in these neighborhoods and operate outside the, quote, safe areas for longer periods of time. This gained trust amongst the Iraqi people. This also caused the terrorists to not be able to stay around recruiting people or doing their terrorist deeds, because they were constantly under the watch eye of our troops. And that sort of tactic could have taken place without an increase in troop levels. So, the idea that the increase in troops is what caused the actual drop in violence is flawed. A, because it has shown in part, at least in part, that the violence was dropped by ethnic cleansing, and B, that we actually saw a drop in violence because of a change in tactics as well. So whether or not the increase of troop levels actually mattered, it's really not proven. Oh, and one more thing about Barack Obama's opposition to the surge was that the tactic that he opposed was the fact that this surge never tried to do anything about actually making the Iraqi people take responsibility, both financial and the risk to their troops, of fully taking over Iraq and Iraq's self-defense. That's what things like H.R. 1591 did. It made sure that we, again, fully funded our troops while funding, equipping the Iraqi military to prepare to defend themselves.
He says that he supports the fight in Afghanistan, but he does not seem to understand that we cannot win the war against terrorism in Afghanistan alone. It's an important front, but terrorists know no borders.
I 100% guarantee you that Barack Obama understands that Al-Qaeda will not be constrained by the borders of Afghanistan. And that's obvious because Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11, and that's outside of the borders of Afghanistan. What Barack Obama does understand, and what he's making a priority in this election, is that we need to go back after those who attacked us on 9/11. It is an absolute travesty that Osama bin Laden is still breathing air. And we need to make sure that we go after the people who attacked us. And we need to not be distracted by what's going on in Iraq. So what we need to do is we need to draw down our troops in Iraq responsibly while going after the people who attacked us and making sure that Iraq is able to defend themselves against any threats.